Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 3rd of October 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we're delighted to be joined today by Patrick Henningsen, 21st Century Wire, and also Alex Thompson with Eastern Approaches. And of course, Alex will be reporting from the Netherlands. Major events unfolding, Mike.
Major events unfolding yesterday. When we ran the news programme yesterday, the scale of it hadn't quite become clear. So 59 people dead was the last figure I saw, 500 injured. And many people now beginning to ask who was the person who's alleged to have carried out this shooting in Las Vegas. Apparently not an avid gun guy, is what his brother is saying. But Patrick, if I can bring you in first, what do we know about this guy? Is there any reasonable information, or is it just utter chaos in terms of what is known at this point?
Well, we do know a fair bit about the alleged gunman. I'm going to say alleged because so often in these cases, in these news stories, the media has already made the determination of exactly what happened and who's guilty and who did what in advance of any police investigation or any forensic analysis. And more often than not, we see afterwards, weeks or months down the road, there are really important parts of the story that actually didn't happen the way the media said at the time. So hence, this is why we try to just pause a little bit and look at what we study the data and so forth. So we know Stephen Paddock is a retired man, I believe based in the Las Vegas area, and there's lots of rumors floating around. He's an avid gambler and so forth. The police claim that he had 23 guns or something like this in the hotel room, and or 19 guns, and 23 others after they've raided his home as well. So that's a total of 42 firearms. So let's put that off to the side. They've also claiming, the Las Vegas Police Department, that he's in possession of weapons of mass destruction this morning, believe it or not. I'm not kidding, I wish I was. So this is confirmed by the Sheriff's Department. Ammonium nitrate was found at his apartment, according to Sheriff Lombardo, and another tannerite, another explosive as well. So they're calling these the precursors for weapons of mass destruction, or chemical weapons is how Newsweek is spinning the story, and Oklahoma City bombings, same sort of thing there. So that's what they're ramping up this morning. They're claiming that it's a fully automatic weapon that was discharged, over 1,000 rounds, killed and injured all those people which you mentioned before. And they're claiming that this was all done from a quarter of a mile, 1,700 feet at a height of 32 stories away from the targets, the people, the crowd, which is, according to some ballistic experts, very difficult thing to achieve, especially for that man at that age, being of his physical disposition, to be able to handle a fully automatic weapon like that, much less determine where he actually got such a weapon, because as you know, in America, you can't just go and buy fully autos, M4s or AK-47s, military, U.S. standard military grade weaponry. It's not available to the public. So this is the story that's kind of, he's a lone gunman, no other shooters, even though there are reports of second shooters by eyewitnesses at the time on streaming fluid news coverage. The official story now is that he's a lone gunman and that he shot everybody from the 32nd floor at a quarter of a mile roughly at night with a fully automatic weapon, and had all of these weapons that he somehow lugged up to the hotel room, and they're all lined up so he wouldn't have to actually reload mag clips. He was actually, I guess we're told, bringing whole new weapons that were previously loaded as well. It just seems completely unbelievable. But yet, this is the official story.
So, Patrick, before we come on to the issue of gun control itself, what are your thoughts on how the mainstream, I mean, you've touched on it a little bit there, but what are your thoughts on how the mainstream media has covered this? And actually, what are your thoughts on how alternative media has been covering this so far?
Well, on the mainstream media, we actually had, I believe she was a CBS legal executive, Miss Gefton Gold, was fired because she sort of blamed it on Trump supporters, ostensibly, and said how they sort of deserved it in a way. These rednecks, and they didn't say anything when Sandy Hook happened, and this is their just desserts. She was fired. So there's a lot of this going on. If you look at Richard Dawkins, the author, the atheist activist, if you look at his Twitter feed, it's basically, his supporters are saying, "Oh, where's your God now? Where's your God now? God didn't come to help you, did he?" Almost mocking the dead. If the people have died. So the mainstream media generally is just running with the normal script. Mainstream culture in America is kind of twisting this to be kind of against Trump. In other words, Trump has to do something about gun control. This is the theme that's now come in to mainstream coverage. Alternative media coverage, there is full of disinformation from all over the place. There are people putting stuff up on Facebook. There's people dropping in rumors of things that may or may not have happened to sort of cloud and confuse the narrative a little bit, which is unfortunate, but there's some people that are just desperate, I think, for clicks and to make a name for themselves from this story. So there's a lot of bad information going out, poor reporting. There's people stealing videos from other people and uploading it to their Facebook account. And so it's hard to trace the roots of the original videos. One of them is quite compelling. It's about gunshots being fired from the 4th floor, not the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Casino, but the fact that it's been uploaded by a non-credible source on Facebook means that it might, damage the credibility of that video and make it difficult for people to find the original video. This is the problem here. So zero context from a lot of the so-called alternative media coverage, a lot of crazy theorizing, and no forensic analysis. We tend to wait at our 21st Century Wire. We wait. We try to gather the information, analyze it, take a little more time, and so we might put our report out in a few days, maybe in a week. But what we do put out will be comprehensive, and will be sort of fact-based, and as much forensic data as possible.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what about I see the Democratic Party getting on board the gun control agenda. Are people going to get past the hysteria of this event, as terrible as it is, and have a rational conversation about this, or is this going to be ramped up by certain elements over the next couple of weeks?
But usually, it's a normal routine in the U.S. In the aftermath of any of these events. The gun control issue becomes on the table again, and then it sort of raises that up, and then gun sales go absolutely through the roof. So the gun manufacturers always benefit very well from these mass shootings, and they did better than ever under President Obama, because with the fear of firearms control, you can see a spike in gun sales. So what Fox News was pushing, Shepard Smith, who's one of their anchors, and he would put in leading questions to witnesses or survivors. He would say, "Do you think is it really safe to congregate in crowded spaces now after what you've seen, what you've experienced, the horror, blah blah blah? And are there going to be behavioral changes? Do you think? Should there be behavioral changes? Will this change your behavior in public spaces?" So this is the social engineering which has been put out immediately by Fox News. And I didn't watch CNN, but I could probably guess it's 10 times worse. And so what they're doing is saying we need to ramp up security. We need to ramp up police state measures. We live in a dangerous world. It's not safe. We need more money for our budgets. We need more federal grants for DHS programs for heavy weaponry and high-tech military-grade kit for all of our cops everywhere because it's a war zone, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is, it's not. If you drive around and you go around the United States for the size of the country, it's not a war zone. But this was a very dramatic, theatrical, you could say, very staged event in many ways. The way it was set up as a media event, it's incredible. So the end result is very predictable. So Yeah, that's what I think.
Well, look, we'll just mention Adam Gary's article on the Duran here, because this is an interesting point. Just briefly, Patrick, the mass shooting problem is the headline. Like organised terrorism is a drug problem, and he's really highlighting the number of people that have been involved as mass shooters in the past who have been on some form of antidepressant drugs. Now, obviously, it's difficult in these situations to make any correlation between the use of the drug, any direct correlation between the use of drugs and the events, but it does seem like a bit of a coincidence.
Yes, that's a really important thread which runs between a number of these so-called mass shootings in the United States. And so the use of SSRIs or serotonin uptake inhibitors by these so-called gunmen. I mean, this story here in Las Vegas is almost a parallel of the James Holmes story, which is the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting. And in that case, James Holmes had amassed this giant arsenal on a student, almost a non-working student budget, and managed to amass somehow $20 or $25 or $30,000 worth of stuff somehow. And also he was an unlikely perpetrator, as it were, as is Stephen Paddock. Again, has amassed an arsenal full of all these things. But in the case of this man, he's dead. It's case closed. Really, if the police found this at his home, that's pretty much a done deal in terms of the authorities. So, there's not going to be much challenge to find out what really happened here. It just seems improbable. But yeah, the SSRI thing, the antidepressant medication thing is something that's consistent through most of the so-called mass shooter events in America and elsewhere as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that, Patrick. Now, I know you've got to run, but we wanted to mention this because the final report from the Australian Transportation Safety Board on the MH370 disappearance is out because, of course, as you know, as we all know, earlier this year, the search operation was stopped. They've issued a final report, and they're basically, well, what are they saying? First of all, they're saying that it's really staggering. They say that in this day and age, any aircraft can disappear in this way. They say it's almost inconceivable and certainly societally unacceptable in the modern aviation era for a large commercial aircraft to be missing and for the world not to know with certainty what became of the aircraft and those on board. And so they're calling for additional tracking electronics to be on these aircraft. But the other point that's made in here, which Reuters and others picked up on, was the suggestion that 6 weeks before the aircraft's disappearance, that the captain of the aircraft was using his home flight simulator to fly a route that was initially similar to part of the route flown by MH370. That in the flight simulation, he had flown the aircraft approximately 4,200 nautical miles, which is further than was possible with the fuel loaded on board the aircraft for the actual flight that he flew. And they seem to be suggesting that this is almost an Andrei Lubitz type situation, that the suggestion seems to be that he's rehearsed something. It all seems pretty incredible.
It is incredible. What that report doesn't do. It's funny how in this report they're saying it's inconceivable in this day and age that a passenger jumbo jet can just disappear out of thin air, and yet on the same hand, this report is presenting the explanation of this flight being ditched, MH370, in the southern Indian Ocean, not challenging where that theory is coming from. And it's coming from a British satellite firm called Inmarsat. And Inmarsat has 30 satellites in its array in orbit. They're a telecommunications company. They deal with high-level communications, also military level networks as well. And so they also they overlap with Raytheon up in orbit with the satellite systems. And so Inmarsat provided, I think 10 days after the event, came up and said, oh, we've got the answer. We have some computer model data here, which says that it's likely that this plane was ditched somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. And no one's challenging this. We challenged it at the time, though. 21st Century Wire did. No one said anything, of course. We said, this is at best a guesswork here by Inmarsat, and it was taken as gospel. And so the Australian government, under the divine wisdom of Tony Abbott at the time, who reminds me very much of Tony Blair, but that's another story, deployed 50 ships, I think, 60 ships, 50 aircrafts on a wild goose chase for this airplane combing the southern Indian Ocean, looking for a needle in a haystack, found nothing, got excited about Flotsam and Jetsam on the news a few times. And so it's all based on Inmarsat's guesswork. So no one's challenging that. So how can you be upset about a plane disappearing and you're not willing to challenge the fact that you might have been sent looking in the wrong place? It's common sense. But yet there seems to be a lack of common sense in this story about MH370. Meanwhile, there are eyewitness reports of a low-flying jumbo jet over the Maldives heading towards Diego Garcia at the time from local press in the Maldives. That's on record. Unfortunately, that's not given the same level of weight as the guesswork from the great British satellite firm Inmarsat.
Okay. I don't think there's much else we can say about that.
I'll just put one comment, if I may. If we think about this in terms of terrorism, just think what we're saying. If somebody somewhere can take an airliner and it can simply disappear, think what you could do with that aircraft. So I find it amazing that we haven't got the whole of the military and intelligence services in uproar about how a plane can disappear in this way.
Patrick, thank you very much for that, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Let's move on to the annual review of the National Cybersecurity Centre, which of course established 12 months ago. This is, what can I say about it? This organisation is now responsible for managing all the cyber attacks on the UK, Brian, including the so-called ransomware attack on the National Health Service some time ago, if you remember, which of course was absolutely the responsibility of North Korea. They did that according to the NCSC, so that's guaranteed. They say that significant attacks ranged from that attack to attacks on the UK and Scottish parliaments, through to attacks on large and small businesses and other organisations. This is according to Kieran Martin, the chief executive of NCSC. He said that British security officials believe that the hackers in North Korea were behind that NHS attack. And he said that much of the NCSC's work aims to make successful attacks less likely, and to that end, the NCSC has so far produced more than 200,000 protective items for military communications. They've supported the Cabinet Office in developing more secure communications for key government organisations, and they've supported the Home Office in ensuring the security of new mobile communications for emergency services. This is all fantastic stuff. Of course, part of GCHQ, and they've brought together elements of GCHQ with previously separate parts of government and intelligence to create one single one-stop shop for UK cybersecurity. It's fantastic. They say that though a pioneering partnership with the private sector, tens of millions of suspicious communications in the UK are being blocked every month. So I thought I'd bring Alex in at this point and see what your thoughts are on the NCSC and how successful they are, and whether you believe for 1 second that the NHS ransomware attack was anything to do with North Korea.
On the latter point, Mike, no, I don't think there's a snowball's chance in a hot place of that having been anything to do with the DPRK. The problem with what Kieran was saying there, I remember him vaguely from my time inside, is that the successes he was describing are from the precursor body, which was a wing of GCHQ called the Communications Electronic Security Group, or CESG. They're the chaps who over the decades provided government and military with all the secure kit. What the National Cybersecurity Centre has done is taken the sexiness of their proven expertise and merged it with a lot of, what should we say, mid-career joiners, marketeers and who knows what, drawn from all over the blob of the third sector, and put them in a sexy building in London Victoria area. And basically it's a selling shop. They even call it a one-stop shop in what you just mentioned. It is to sell the idea of cyber and cybersecurity to a panicked group of A-list companies, and I think the agencies still use that term, the A-list, the companies with whom they work commercially. And it's also to be on board with these companies. There's a term that's used in the intelligence agencies of UK PLC, meaning the leading businesses. And so there's a very incestuous relationship going on here. I'm not denigrating the key info security expertise of some of these chaps who've been at it a very long time, but I have to say, whenever it gets into being pressed for an intelligence assessment, it's just the same on the InfoSec side of the house as it is on the SIGINT side of the house, which is where you're doing the poaching rather than the gamekeeping. In other words, if you were asked to come out with an assessment of who did what, you're effectively dressing up human factors and probabilities and judgment as if it was hard scientific fact, and the full weight of and majesty of the intelligence services behind it. It remains a human judgment and a political environment. So you should look at the political and human motives behind any of these claims by the NCSC.
Well, you've just mentioned SIGINT, and you sent me this earlier, a tweet, and you've captioned it, CIA displacing the NSA's Russia SIGINT mission. What's going on here?
Well, I got this from one of our Russian viewers who was previously, I suppose, one of my opposite numbers or targets. We've got a nice rapport going on now. And he and I agree that what's happening is that the cultured Russophile in some cases, but certainly educated Russia hands at the NSA are in some ways being sidelined by one of the many ways in which Langley now seems to be purloining some of the NSA's best signals intelligence kit and techniques and operations and putting them in-house at Langley, or taking control of them through the US Embassy network where some of this stuff is located. And here in that tweet, they're actually calling for people who speak Russian and who are US citizens with a college degree. And underneath we see in Russian, "Raskryt pravdu," which is hide the truth, which is an interesting phrase. And that's a short link which takes you to a CIA recruitment page. So the core or traditional mission of CIA is human intelligence. So, okay, they use some technical kit like bugging, but it remains human targets. The signals intelligence is supposed to be done by people at NSA with a very different corporate culture. But we've seen CIA treading on NSA's toes a number of times in the last few years around the scandals around Comey, for example. The short version of that seems to be that CIA, or the deep state within CIA, got enraged to find that NSA was actually able to follow some of the deep state's machinations and didn't want any repeat of that. So in caricatured terms, to simplify it for a general audience, NSA consists of Russia hands who know and respect the Russians, and CIA largely, at some of its areas, certainly on the DI side as opposed to the DO side of CIA, consists of people who want to track them and whack them, basically. And that's the element of the UK-US deep state which is gaining the upper hand in the Russia mission.
Can I just add into that, Alex? Of course, this mix between proper state security, whether it's for SIGINT or it's the gamekeeper side, this is the dangerous thing. We've got this fascistic system coming into place now. We don't know quite whether we're dealing with the government or we're dealing with a private company.
That is very much my worry about what CESG has become. They used to be just as reticent about their publicity as the linguistic and cryptanalyst sides of GCHQ were, but starting in the last decade, the noughties, there was a massive push to commercialize CESG's expertise, and that's culminated in this NCSC, which has got its own profile in London. If we're not careful, soon that building and its cachet is going to rival or outshine the donut. I don't say that with partisan interests. InfoSec is important work just as much as SIGINT is, but the two are supposed to be working together behind the scenes. You could say that GCHQ was excessively secretive back at a time when there was the strike and the avowal to Parliament by Mrs. Thatcher. But I think we've passed the sweet spot in the 90s and early noughties when GCHQ was known about by Parliament. And we're now getting to the stage where GCHQ, and certainly its InfoSec arm, is being unhealthily marketed. And as both you and I have just said, Brian, very much enmeshed with certain corporate interests. Don't like it one bit.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's come in at this angle because Amber Rudd is using the I word. She says that people who repeatedly view terrorist content online could face up to 15 years behind bars. A lot of Amber Rudd, I don't remember hearing or seeing this debated in Westminster at all, Mike. So all of a sudden we've got one of these announcements. A lot of pressure on this woman at the moment. I think she's looking, I've got to say it, a little bit rough. I'm not just being unkind to her. I think this lady's under immense pressure. Have a look at her face here. But what does she say? I want to make sure those who view despicable terrorist content online, including jihadi websites, far-right propaganda and bomb-making instructions, face the full force of the law. There's currently a gap in the law around material that's viewed or streamed from the internet without being permanently downloaded. So this is pretty heavy stuff. She's decided, no debate in Westminster. How did she decide this? Let's go on. This is an increasingly common means by which material is accessed online for criminal purposes and is a particularly prevalent means of viewing extremist materials such as videos and web pages. And we've got to remember that it's the government, of course, who decides what's going to be viewed. This one you can freeze on screen because to get it all in the text, a little bit small there. But essentially, she was asked by an audience member if she understood how end-to-end encryption worked. She said, it's easy to be patronised in this business. We'll do our best to understand it. We'll take advice. Basically, she doesn't understand it. But she said, I don't need to understand how encryption works to understand how it's helping the criminals. I will engage with the security services to find the best way to combat that. So a lot of eyes, Mike, and we're now seeing some really draconian stuff. The government, no, not the government, people in rooms with closed doors decide what is propaganda. They decide, and then they decide on their own without debate in Westminster that we're going to face 15-year jail penalties for viewing the material they decide is extremist.
Yeah, this is a very thin end of a very nasty wedge, isn't it?
Yeah.
As soon as they decide what I'm entitled to read, and they criminalise me reading material, I haven't committed any offence by reading something, have I? If I take that information and I make a bomb, or I buy the materials to make a bomb, then perhaps that's something different. But that's the act of reading the information surely is not a criminal offence.
This is thought crime. This is future crime. You may commit this in the future, so we're going to put you in prison.
Okay, well, let's move on to a couple of advertisements as usual. Frome Stop Wars event media on trial. John Pilger headlining that. That's on Thursday, the 19th of October in the Bloomsbury Central Baptist Church. Details on Eventbrite. Just search for Media on Trial and John Pilger and you'll get to that. Tickets, I believe, are £9 in advance, £10 on the door. Do get along if you possibly can. And this coming Sunday, Alternative View 8.1, taking place in the Connaught Rooms in London. That's 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get along to that if you can as well. You're speaking at that, Patrick Henningston speaking at that, and Ian Crane and Dr. Graham Downing. What's next?
It's back to, back to Alex and military unification.
Yes, Alex, Macron sets out EU military union in terms.
Yes, Mike, the text is a bit small, so perhaps you might want to read my translation of those 4 tweets, which came in just under a week ago, in which Emmanuel Macron, and this has since been welcomed by Juncker, was saying what the French government wants to see in the European Union's military.
So the first one says Europe must be equipped with a shared unified intervention force, a shared unified military budget, and a shared unified military doctrine. The second one says, I propose that our EU partners, that we enrol in our national military recruits from any European countries which offer, and it must say something else. I wish to see the creation of a European Intelligence Academy to boost the ties between our countries by means of training initiatives. And finally, we also need to set up a European court against organised crime and terrorism.
So the whole caboodle is there: the single military union, the tax, the budgeting that David Ellis has been talking about, and the European FBI. And now there was some debate here, including by one of the FCO's directors. I exchanged something with him on Twitter, in which he was at least pretending not to know what Macron meant, because the French adjective commun means either shared or unified. There are more explicit words. For example, unique, marché unique, for example, the single market, money unique, the single currency, that would be explicit. and communautaire would also mean belonging to the European Union. That would also be too explicit. So he's used this commun, shared, and the FCO director in question was saying now, is he proposing something on top of what we already have, like an extra tier of European Union military bells and whistles, or is he expecting to replace the existing national militaries? So that was, of course, a bit of dissimulation. So I put him right on that by pointing out that Jacques Delors had said that we needed a défense commune, shared or united military, back in 1984. You can read about that in David Ellis's articles on ukcolumns.org/defence. So a lot of dissimulation going on here, but Macron has said in terms, and this is a massive change of tone from previous French presidents who've been sort of caught between French souverainisme and the European Union project. Macron's view is, well, hey, let's go for it. We can harness the Franco-German axis and be the European Union military. Of course, he's unlike previous French presidents. He's come straight out of the Anglo-American Swiss blob, the financial blob. So he actually wants to marry the prestige and gloire de la France with the Anglo money, which is an extremely dangerous setup because he's going to be selling to the French as French prestige, something which actually is an Anglo plan.
And more coming out on mergers in the military-industrial complex, as it were. This is Les Echos, and they're basically pointing out the Alstom-Siemens merger. So this what's this? Alstom's a French company, was it? And yes, Siemens obviously German.
People will know Alstom as GEC Alstom, for example, and they're involved in various electronic and high-tech manufacturing, including railway. Siemens, of course, have a finger in every pie, and they like to sell high-tech equipment to Europe, like high-spec healthcare stuff, all kinds of radio equipment, but they also sell to dictatorships around the world. What's going on here is Siemens represents German old money, basically, and there's intermittently through the 20th century, German old money, the industrial class, popped its head above the parapet at times when Germany was going too pro-Western or indeed too pro-Russian, and said, hang on, we could actually do with cooperating with the Chinese, and we would have world hegemony then. And it's the part of this agenda we've covered many times before of Eurasia taking its destiny in its own hands and throwing off the Anglo-Saxon maritime trading stranglehold of it. At this time, the French, Germans and Benelux do seem to have gone all together into this plot because they realised that the Anglo model is bankrupt and has nothing more to offer them. The Chinese already own the port of Rotterdam, for example. So German, Dutch, French state level people and the industrialists, crucially, behind them are saying, well, we may as well join in the Chinese One Belt, One Road project. I think they're preparing quite heavily for that. And part of this is that Siemens would divest itself of its rail operations and hand that to the French, so that what French politicians are talking about now, a Peking, Moscow, Paris axis, would actually exist, including in railway terms. So we would lose our cooperation with the most important parts of the continent. They would no longer look to us for finance from the city.
But it's not so rosy in Holland.
No, this is the Defence Minister, Hennis Plasschaert, who is on her way out. The Telegraph has a video on the right-hand side there. That's a popular paper. On the left, I've just chosen the Dutchman's tweet, because they like to use English phrases, so it's interesting for our viewers to see this. And he's saying in Dutch here that she doesn't have the foggiest idea about defence. But this is because the inquest is out this week into a fatal accident which claimed the lives of 2 Dutch servicemen on training exercises in Mali last summer. They used a type of munition which has now been revealed the Dutch MOD knew would blow up in hot weather. Well, Mali, pretty hot. And at first I wondered whether this was paring down the stocks in anticipation of doing their purchasing on a joint basis with the French and German military, particularly the Germans. That's where the Dutch have entered into with the Dutch-German partnerships, but eventually it'll be Franco-German axis. But no, it turns out that the Dutch MOD, as far as we currently know, bought these dud shells or sub-spec shells from Bulgarian spares, which is particularly indicative in this time when Dilyana Gaitangiyeva's reporting on how Bulgarian stuff is finding its way to the Middle East.
Indeed.
Well, we needn't worry because, of course, we've got Brexit coming up. Brexit without the exit, except that David Davis is exiting because he's announced in the last few hours that he's looking to retire. I think in 2019 or thereabouts, he's decided he won't follow the whole negotiations through. So, of course, the Telegraph pointing out here that while he's announcing early that he's going, so he must be a half-hearted negotiator, the European negotiator there on the right, he's staying in post. So what sort of article is this? Not really sure, but it's all, well, that Brexit is just a bit difficult and we're not sure what's going to happen. But the good news is that we've got a new UKIP leader, Henry Bolton, and I'm just going to do a very, very quick look through some of the information we've looked at because this man is extremely interesting. I've been told off for using Google, but of course a lot of other people use it. So let's see what they see. So we've got Henry Bolton ditches the net migration cap. What is the point of UKIP? Lots of good articles. He's the Guardian saying he was of Farage and he's a new Farage, and that's an interesting comment. We've got this one here: EU will negotiate forever, and apparently Mr. Bolton is standing up strongly for, well, I'm not too sure. These are his priorities. The first bit I noticed on this was Safer Britain. What's this about, Mike? Aren't we interested in getting out of the European Union? No, we're into Safer Britain. Is that safer streets, the roads, children? Not sure. But down here it's good because he said that his priorities are from ensuring that EU institutions no longer have jurisdiction over the UK. But he's been working in the background to help build those very European institutions, and we'll have a look at those in a minute. He's going to change the party. This is all navel gazing. We're going to get into Europe. We're going to change the party. We're going to modernise it. And as a leader, I will drive all of these internal agendas and deliver meaningful internal change. This is the speak of the state.
It's all very common purpose, isn't it?
It's absolutely. So let's have a look at him. Here he is. Apparently on the EU, he's been highly critical of British plans to form a security partnership with the bloc, saying Brussels would have a hold on British forces beyond Brexit. So apparently he's worried about British security and the key issue, Falkland Islands and Gibraltar. He's campaigned against extremism. So these are good mainstream politics. He's also very big on female genital mutilation, right, which is an unpleasant thing. But at the moment for Britain, is that one of the leading worries? Not sure. Well, go and have a look at the material from the conference. And it gets very interesting here when you have a look at some of his jobs. I just have to catch up with myself here because this text is particularly small. If you can just help that. But he's been working, if I bring in the second one as well, he's been working with the EU's common security and defence policy, and he's also head of the border security programme. So this man absolutely working for the European Union in key areas, defence and border security.
Sorry, I've got to just ask, Brian.
Yeah.
Why is somebody who has on their CV that he was a lead planner for EU common security and defence policy, how does this man then become leader of UKIP?
Well, this is a very good question. I'll come on to a little bit more. Going to do this quickly. We're just bringing this document, which is one I found many years ago, which is the Organisation for Security in Europe. And what was it called? Common Purpose. Yeah. Well, have a look at his material about Henry. And this man is establishment through and through. UK Foreign Office, which has helped to put the whole European problem in place. United Nations, globalisation. OSCE, there we are, the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And at the end, he's also been a diplomat and advisor for the European Union. Just the man to lead UKIP, I think.
Perfect. And
of course, he's been rewarded with a gong, an OBE. Apparently, this is what Anne said to him, that the rules-based international order were delighted with his efforts. And who's the man who's put this man in power? It's Nigel Farage. And I say that Nigel Farage is still in control of the party and he's in control of Bolton. And 17 million people have been deceived. I'm just going to end on this for this section. Who will command the unified EU military force? as former lead planner for the EU Common Security and Defence Policy, I'm pretty sure Mr. Bolton might know.
Yes. Alex, have you any thoughts on that?
Just regarding that Common Security and Defence Policy, the CSDP, Denmark has a formal opt-out and has done since the Edinburgh Agreement of 1992, so it's better off than we are. But there was a time when some of the CSDP strands were also opted out of by Britain. It was, of course, Theresa May as Home Secretary who opted us back in again, like the Grand Old Duke of York. But at the time, we have to investigate further what the time frame was. But perhaps, given the relative order of that in his CV compared with the other things, that he was working on the CSDP at a time when Britain was not a core participant in it.
Okay.
I think there are lots of questions to be asked and answered around this man. I don't get a comfortable feeling, particularly when I see him standing up on camera and saying the biggest problem is our borders. And yet, of course, the European Union threw our borders open in the first place. And it would appear that since he's been working with them for 10 years, 1997, Henry Bolton's been working with the EU, he must be part of the problem. I'll wait and see what the response is.
Any thoughts?
I think
yes, it's. I don't know what to make of this, really. I mean, Henry Bolton was tipped by a couple of people early on in the campaign, wasn't he, as someone worth watching. But he seems to have become a bit of a cipher later on in the campaign, almost as if one thought he was a stalking horse for another candidate, except it was the other candidates that dropped out or got fewer votes than him. I think Anne-Marie Waters, not that I'm a core supporter of all her sayings, might have more about him that she'll be able to trot out once she's safely ensconced in a new party or movement, which seems to be what she's planning to do. But I wouldn't hold out any hopes about him.
Well, my take on this man is this man has been specifically brought in because the state, the establishment, desperately worried about what UKIP could do. His job will be to introvert the party. It's going to focus on immigration. It's not going to talk about EU military unification. He's not going to be talking about treason or what's happening in our courts, for example. This man is going to follow Farage and take UKIP precisely nowhere. That's my prediction. Done.
Yep.
So I think we'll just bring this one in. Speaking of the courts, thank you very much to those who did attend the Bournemouth court support Liz Watson yesterday. What took place? Well, absolutely fascinating. There was a hearing in the judge's chambers. One member of the public, an Iranian lady, did manage to get in, but was told to leave. She was told to leave because she asked the judge whether this was a public court or whether his chamber was actually a place of business. The judge didn't like that, so no members of the public got in. The public supporters who were still in the court building were told they must go to a separate room on their own, which they didn't like much, so the police were called. One man was arrested on a completely cooked up charge of breach of the peace, taken to a police station but released later. Public were told they couldn't release any details on him because of data protection. Liz Watson was not allowed to enter the Star Chamber, especially as the barrister for the other side had a 30-minute private audience with the judge before the start of the so-called trial. And Liz Watson was made bankrupt in the secret hearing which took place in Judge Dickinson's Star Chamber. So that's the state of the law in Britain today, Mike.
Yes, well, it must get better, Brian. It must get better because, of course, there's a massive reform process going on within the judicial system at the moment, being driven by David Lidington, who's the Lord Chancellor. And apparently we live with a legal system. It's a system that forms laws from the lives of men and women rather than directing them to live under forms of law. In our ancient, established and unbroken democracy, the law, our law, is truly among the nation's most treasured assets, which is why he is systematically breaking it down and destroying it.
Yeah.
Because what he says there is absolutely right. He's hit it on the head. Now, he was saying that at the swearing in of the new Lord Chief Justice, who is Sir Ian Burnett. Well, I was going to show a video clip, but I don't have time to do that now. But Ian Burnett, absolutely in his acceptance speech, or his comments just prior to being sworn in, was commenting on how uncorruptible the judicial system is in the UK at the moment.
Astonishing.
So it is astonishing. Now, this man is the youngest Lord Chief Justice that we've had for 50 years or so, and the second youngest ever. So we wait and see what he does, but he is absolutely determined to drive through this reform process, particularly the digitisation of the legal system. So that's fantastic. But Alex, in the meantime, just to finish off, this article here from Wales Online suggesting that England is turning Wales into a new penal colony, and this is because of the potential or the possibility of building this new super prison.
That's right, Mike. And this new super prison is on brownfield land, or is planned for brownfield land, in the council area of Port Talbot, at the post-industrial poorest end of the western end of the South Wales Valleys complex. And of course, Port Talbot is notorious to us from the Neath Port Talbot Council's shenanigans. There is some crossover, unlikely as it might seem, with council corruption here, because the most fantastically corrupt councils in Wales, Anglesey being another, has seemed to have reached strategic level deals in some cases with the establishment that they will offer their resources for the establishment. Now, if you watch Ian Crane's latest, and though he doesn't have particular reference to Wales, but I've been in touch with him since then about Wales, one of the core assets that these stripped out poorest parts of Wales offer is the below ground system of mines which are suitable to receive nuclear waste. And above ground, they offer, just like West Virginia, which also has the mines, actually, it's exactly the same model. Above ground, they've got these impoverished people who apparently will gratefully take any work going, including being prison warders for the, as we say, the increasing underclass and victim class of our state. So I think our Welsh viewers need to ask some very penetrating questions, and particularly look for stitch-up routes running between their local councils and the boards of companies active in those parts of Wales.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Alex. I'm just going to say to our viewers and listeners, we're talking the subject of law. We think what we're watching is a dictatorship installing itself in the United Kingdom extremely quickly, a fascistic state. What can we do about this? Talk, spread the word, talk to people about what's happening. And of course, the foundation stone to stopping what's happening is we need to reinstate our proper system of law in this country, which is common law. And of course, that means trial by juries. So if you don't know much about the subject, you can have a look at what the British Constitution Group is doing. But are we able to tackle what's happening? Yes. What do we need? We need common law courts to come back in to tackle the state criminality and, of course, the treason. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us. And if you're not a subscriber of UK Column, please consider taking out a subscription. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.